Hey there, time-travelling toy collector friends and Transformers fans alike. Welcome back to my channel. I am the time-travelling toy collector, and this is a review of Studio Series 8601 Jazz. This is Jazz as he appeared in the 1986 Transformers the movie. So this is the Transformers Studio Series range, where they are focusing very specifically on characters as they appeared in, as we can see here, Transformers the movie back in 1986, and they're going for a combination, really, I think it's fair to say, of Generation 1 Transformers accuracy along with the accuracy of the animation itself. So quite a challenge, really, because as we know from both the comics and also from the original animations, they didn't really serve the original G1 models very well, because they had to embellish the nature of the robots, because the robots in their original iterations weren't the most articulate items. Now, by articulate items, I don't mean they couldn't talk well, like I can. What I actually meant was, you know, their points of articulation were very limited. We nowadays, quite rightly, expect our Transformers toys to come with a high degree of joint articulation, whether it's shoulders, knees, hips, head, fingers, in some cases, hand, you know, all wrists, lots of articulation. Whereas in the case of Generation 1, the predominant articulation existed purely to support the transformation, and the product was based around the vehicle mode. So the vehicle mode would be accurate, and then the robot mode would be whatever they could conjure up from the toy mode, basically. Let's be honest, that's the case. And it dates back to the history, you know, the whole Diaclone history of the Transformers. And if you want to know about the history of the Transformers, there are some fantastic YouTube channels out there. I would recommend Transformers The Basics, which is an excellent channel, and you can watch loads of playlists that give you some really detailed historical perspectives on the Transformers, on individual characters of the Transformers, and perhaps even more importantly, the history of the Transformers as a toy line itself. So if you're stuck for some YouTube videos to go and watch Transformers The Basics, and feel free to let him know in the comments that I suggested that you do so. So who do we have here? We have here Autobot Spy from Generation 1, Jazz, and again, I'm going to start with him in his box. I won't pretend otherwise. I have had him out of his box, so he's no longer gleamingly mint. Before you worry that I'm going to do some sort of on-air toy damage by opening the box up. He has been opened. I have had him out. I'm quite comfortable handling him. I know for some people that's sacrilege, but for me, I haven't bought these to keep them in the box. Overall, I have bought them for display purposes. For storage purposes, I am keeping the boxes, however, and you know, I don't think that's necessarily a bad call. If of course you are stuck for space, you might want to reconsider that. Anyhow, here we are. As ever, you have some fantastic box art. This is instantly recognizable Jazz from Generation 1. Not so recognizable if you're a fan of the live action films. Nothing wrong with that universe, unless you think there is, and we'll talk about that elsewhere. But for me, Generation 1 Jazz is very iconic in his design, in his appearance, and we can see through the massively transparent window element of this box that he has retained much of that original form here. I do know that there are those online who have picked up on the fact that his decals and paint are not as identical as they could be to Generation 1. I also understand that organisations like Repro Labels and Toy Hacks have produced sticker sheets that you can use to upgrade, if that's the right phrase, or redress perhaps, your Jazz and other figures so that they are far more G1 accurate should that be your thing. At the moment, I'm leaving him as he's been made, because I want to talk about him as he's been made. But I am mindful that that's a consideration that some collectors have, and that some people may feel very strongly about, and I can fully understand why you would, because if you're going for accuracy, why not go the whole hog? So moving around that, here's the back part of the packaging, where you can see, try and get it so there's no reflection too much. There is Jazz in his robot mode, and of course in his familiar car mode. We also get, which is something I think they do particularly well with this Studio Series 86 line, is we also get included, as you can see it here, and we'll see it more in a moment, a diorama which Jazz can feature prominently in. So yeah, in terms of packaging, it is kind of standard Studio 86 packaging. I am always a fan. I've yet to find the figure, I dare say it'll come at some point. I've yet to find the figure from these new releases where I don't love the realistic and accurate box art. And I think it's again, that's also for me very reminiscent of the G1 representation of the figures when we were purchasing them. You may recall, if you were shopping for G1 figures at the time or now, that often the majority of the time, in fact, the figures arrived in their vehicle mode, and it was, as is here, the robot mode that was shown as part of the Transformers box art, the iconic Transformers box art. And then once we got the figure out and we transformed it from car to robot, we suddenly found that the poses shown on the box art were either impossible or defied the laws of physics, when you've actually got a piece of die-cast metal or a piece of plastic that can't do anything apart from stand there. And apologies if this is a sensitivity issue, but I do like to be a realist where I can. I say stand there, sometimes they couldn't even do that because of their design, as their robot mode design. They needed some help to stand up. They couldn't all manage it. But anyway, you know, that's part of the charm of the period. So this has been Jazz in his box. Now let's take Jazz out of his box. So in the first instance, I'm just going to sort of pop out the figure in its plastic packaging, and I'll also whop out the diorama packaging box. I'm going to pop that to one side for now, and I'm going to pop Jazz to one side for now, along with his little instruction pack, not too hefty, and there's the very important details that tell me in a multitude of languages that I don't want to eat any of him because it might choke me. Go figure. So Jazz is a deluxe class, so he's not a gigantic figure, and what I like is that they have beautifully scaled. They've beautifully scaled all of the diorama to the figures that you're getting. So here we have Jazz's backdrop, and we can see that this is Moonbase 1 from the 1986 animated movie, which is where we joined Jazz in his part of that. So I'm just gonna, and you can see with those sidebars, it's a really nice piece. It's a really nice display piece, and I for one I'm a big fan and very appreciative of Hasbro for giving us this. So I'm just popping him out while I can, and let's grab his gun as well if I can. But in the meantime, here is the guy in question. It's Jazz. I'm popping it on this display base, just to give you a sense of what that can look like. And of course, it's quite posable, so we can do more than just plonking there. But you know, he exudes, does he not, Generation 1 goodness. He has elbow and shoulder articulation. He has, of course, head rotation. We have everything we'd expect to have around the hip joints and the knee joints, and some slightly posable ankle and foot joints. Not much by way of ankle posability there, or at least I don't want to force it if it is. But look at this guy. I mean, I'm trying to keep him in focus. But you know, when you think about, and I don't have him with me right now, but I do have the Generation 1 Jazz, who is, you know, he is this character, but he's far more static and far more fragile. Actually, my Jazz is particularly fragile, so I tend to leave him in Porsche mode because he's not that stable on his legs, bless him. But here we have the representation of Jazz, and he has a wee bit of a backpack. Yes, I've got the doors out because I quite like the doors being out. I know that you don't have to have them out, so you don't need to tell me that in the comments. That bit I know, but I quite like the old-fashioned doors out variation of Jazz, because that does make me very reminiscent of the old school Jazz. As you can see, you're picking it up, I've no doubt. There is some looseness in his leg joints, which again, ironically, is a little bit reminiscent of old school Jazz. But I think, in terms of capturing the spirit of the piece, it's a really lovely reproduction of the Generation 1 model, and definitely a really good production of the animated version of Jazz that we got in the film. I mean, let's go in a bit closer for the head sculpt. You can see just how detailed that face is, with the lovely tint on his eye visor, the detailing on the bodywork, beautiful Autobot symbol. You can see the leg sculpts, you can see all of the detailing and paneling on the legs. He has everything that you would remember from the G1. Again, slightly larger feet to help him stand up, which is never going to be a bad thing. And he scales so well to the animated background, you know, which I think is it's a real plus point. They score really highly on this one for me, not just across Jazz, but across any of the Studio Series ranges. So let me just zoom out a little bit more to give us a bit of context for the figure in situ, as it were. Yep. So I'm a fan. This wins me over. I'm really glad that I've sort of opted into the Studio Series range. Jazz really says, yep, I'm a 1980s character reimagined in the 21st century, but retaining much of my 1980s identity, and it's beautiful. It's lovely to see it. It's lovely to see the attention to that classic design. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a couple of seconds in real time to transform him off screen into his vehicle mode, and I'll also put him side by side with his classic vehicle mode as I dig out classic G1 Jazz for a little comparison. But as I say, I won't be transforming G1 Jazz because he is quite the fragile piece. So hold on to your throttle and I'll be right back. And as if by magic, there we go. So here we have Jazz transformed into his more familiar Porsche mode. Now, I've done this quite quickly, so it's not the perfect arrangement. You'll see on my edition, the 14 on his door here is slightly askew on this side, not so much this side. But the rest of the detailing is very, very nice. Love the carryover of the Autobot insignia here. Love all of the paneling detail. Love the transparency of the glass canopy. I love the detailing of the wheels. You know, it's very nice. The spoiler is there, of course. You've got the headlights. Yeah, does he have the wonky 14? Does he have the same detailing that we saw and we're familiar with on G1 Jazz? No, not completely. Similarly, does he have the same detailing that we saw on G1 Jazz in the animated series and in the animated movie? No, not really. But does he conjure up the iconic sense of G1 Jazz? Most definitely. And I think really that's what we're looking at. Well, that's what I'm looking at when I'm looking for playability. is how well that playability lends itself in both modes. Now I'm just going to be very gentle here because I've dug out, and as you can see, he's not well. You can see where the plastic has yellowed tremendously against the original die cast. But here is old school 1980s Generation 1 Jazz in car mode, and he's barely holding it together, as you can see. Hence me not really wanting to do too much transformation with him. Yeah, so you can see from the front that he's very evocative. You know, our new Studio Series 86 Jazz, very, very evocative of the original. You know, it's very hard to say that they haven't, you couldn't in all honesty and good faith say that they have unsuccessfully captured his Generation 1 self, because I think they've done a really good job of that. And of course, whilst this may be a heavier toy because of the amount of die cast etc that's in the build, this one is more durable. So I would say, whilst he makes a great display piece, and he really does, you know, his free reading wheels, his lightweight, predominantly plastic content means that he is a more robust and durable figure. Should you want to play, or should you want to let younger hands near him, he would survive relatively unscathed, or as unscathed as a toy car would do in the hands of those playing with a toy car. Overall, I think Jazz is a fantastic Studio Series edition, kicking off the range as 01. I think it's a slight shame that they couldn't match the pegging for the wheels, and to be honest, I prefer the wheel trims at the back rather than the front, or at least coloured the peg silver to match, so it's not that sort of obvious black peg there jumping out at us. But that's a very small nitpicky point to make. Otherwise, I think the panelling detail, everything about him screams Generation 1 goodness, complete with, as we saw earlier on, his own presentation diorama, which, you know, is nicely self-contained. You can spread it out, or you can position it however you wish, and it's very evocative of the movie. So does it achieve everything it sets out to do? Yes, I would say that it does. Would Studio Series 8601 Jazz have a place in your collection? Well, again, that's always going to be a personal choice, but if your predilection is towards G1 and you like to have screen accurate-ish representations in your toys, and you're a fan of good old-fashioned toy nostalgia, then I'm going to say to you, yes, Studio Series 86 Deluxe Class Jazz most definitely does have a place in your collection. So why not let me know if he's already in your collection, or if you're planning on adding him to your collection, or indeed if this little sort of talk through of Studio Series 86 Jazz has made your mind up one way or the other. I'd love to hear from you, so do let me know in the comments below. Additionally, you can always message me at the Time Travelling Toy Collector on Instagram, which you're more than welcome to pop over and follow me on. If this has been remotely useful to you, and I do hope that it has, hit that thumbs up just to let me know that you've stuck with it and you've watched it for the last 10 or so minutes. I very much appreciate it. Similarly, whilst you're doing that, why not give a sub to the channel? That would be so much appreciated. And again, if you're going to subscribe, hit those notifications so that you never miss a future video, particularly if you're a fan of Studio Series, because I'll be aiming to go through as many of them as I can over the coming weeks, months, and who knows, maybe years, although I suspect they'll run out of figures long before then. Equally, if there's any figures in the Studio Series range you want me to look at, or you have a thought on, or you feel passionately about one way or the other, do let me know, and I'll be happy to consider and explore your thoughts when looking at the figures in question. Thank you for being an amazing audience and staying with me these last 10 or so minutes. You've been fantastic. I've been the time traveling toy collector. This has been Studio Series 8601 Jazz, and I will see you in the next video. So until then, roll out.